Hello, I'm Ed Rabyd, otherwise known as the Rabyd Atheist, a former pastor turned atheist, now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. You are free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. And I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell so you can get more content as released. And feel free to comment below. And I would appreciate, I would appreciate it if you shared my videos too. Just trying to build the channel. This is my week 19 video. Normally I'm sorry, a little late about it. It'll be released Saturday as soon as I get it done and rendered. But Friday I came home and I was pretty emotionally drained by all the events in our world. Probably something that may not be apparently obvious, but over the years as a pastor, and probably because of my natural baseline, I'm fairly empathic. So I pick up a lot of emotions of people. And it does have one negative side effect in the fact that I start to feel those emotions myself. And I'm not even necessarily going through whatever the person's going through. I just kind of feel what they're feeling, and that can be detrimental, especially if they're strong negative emotions. And right now, this country has a lot of strong negative emotions. I guess the first thing I want to do, I think it's appropriate to do this. I want to send my deepest condolences to the family and friends of George Floyd. Today I'm going to talk about two subjects that I think need to be addressed on this one. But before I do anything, I don't know what you're feeling. And a lot of people say the atheists don't have ways to comfort people. But us atheists understand one thing, that when somebody in your life dies, any experience that you're going to have with them is gone forever. And because of that, I think we're a little bit more sympathetic to having somebody ripped out of your life and knowing that you're never going to be able to hug them, hold them, talk to them again, at least in this lifetime. I mean, if you believe in an afterlife, yeah, I get it. But at the same time, I'm coming from a standpoint of saying, hey, in this life, you're just not going to have any interaction with them anymore, and all you're left with is memories, and that is a absolutely terrible thing to deal with. So you have my deepest sympathies, and I pray that you get justice. Pray, yeah. I guess, see, that's one of the other things about deconversion. You still have all these expressions, but you don't mean them anymore, and you have to reconfigure your language. I hope that the human justice system grants you justice, as flawed as it may be, because that's the real issue, isn't it? Today I want to address two issues related to this. Both of them are kind of related to the idea of religion in particular. And in one case, it's the issue of authority and where authority stems from. And it's more of a libertarian issue, and I'm going to address the police officers with that. But we get a lot of our understanding of authority from religion if you're a religious person. Probably the thing that my mother and father, well, my mother mostly, not my father, would pound into my head is, children, obey your parents, for this is right in the Lord. And almost from a very early age, I was kind of a sarcastic asshole, and I've always been a sarcastic asshole in a lot of respects. But one of the side effects of being a sarcastic asshole is you hear something and you immediately try to tear it apart. And whenever I hear children obey your parents now, my immediate thought is, yeah, but what if your parents are abusive and full of shit? Well, I would say now as an atheist, you can take that verse and shove it up your ass. Obedience to authority is not a virtue. It means that you decided that your best chances for survival are to obey the authority, and that's all it is. It doesn't show any courage. It doesn't show any virtue. Obedience is not a virtue. It just isn't. I put it right there with faith. Those two things aren't virtues to me. But one of the things that's trained into us by religion is to obey authorities. One of the classic verses for Christians is Romans 13, where they talk about, obey the authorities over you, for they are given by God, and no authority exists except by God's wishes, which of course creates, in my mind, as an atheist, a whole bunch of problem of evil questions. I mean, like, holy shit, do you realize how many evil fucks have been in charge of governments? Jesus. You want to say that God set that up? Awesome. Awesome. Just more proof that your God's kind of an asshole. But one of the things that happens with that is you begin to see people obeying authority because their faith tells them to obey authority. Now, part of this is the church authorities want to make sure that people obey them, but it has a side effect of obedience to authority that isn't necessarily justified. How does this relate to cops? Because I hear it all the time from the right. You know, when a police officer just shows up, just do what they tell you. Well, what if they're telling you to do something? I mean, there's been several cases recently that have been decided in court. One involved a woman who basically was raped by a cop, and the cop got away with it because she was simply following orders, and she was doing what she was told to do. We've had cases where cops have, committed crimes of another nature and the person that went along, well, it was a police officer and he's telling me what to do. The real problem, of course, is the ability to resist the law and resist everything. And in the case of George Floyd, his resistance was almost non-existent. He's only there because somebody accused him of, writing a bad check, which could be an honest mistake, to be honest, but we'll never know now where George Floyd was with that bad check. The one thing for sure is nobody writing a bad check should die. I know that the officer has been recently charged with murder 3, which I'm going to be frank and honest, not because I don't want more, but because I think it's going to be very difficult to prove murder 3, especially with the coroner's report saying that he didn't die of asphyxiation, he died of complications due to his health. Now, it's pretty sure that these officers aggravated those health issues by their actions, and they certainly didn't have the right to do what they did. So I think more charges will be leveled at these officers, like assault charges and a few other things, because they definitely clearly crossed the line. The guy particularly putting his knee, that you have 2 other guys holding the guy down, that's completely unnecessary. It's an overuse of force. It's definitely clearly police brutality, no matter what. And I'm not sure what infuriates me more about that story. Those guys or the guy standing off to the side with his hands in his pocket justifying what they're doing. I'm not sure which makes me worse, is police brutality or apathy towards it. As a libertarian, I oppose both. And now that I don't have as many cop friends, I can tell you that one of the things that authority does when you have authority, and having been in the pulpit and being claimed as the authority of my churches, it's an addictive drug. The fact that at any time I could have preached a sermon anyway and got my people going in a certain direction. And I consider myself a decent preacher. And I mostly, as I injected more and more emotion into it, you get the ability to emotionally manipulate and this belief that you're an authority figure that can do it. And then you couple this with preaching to people, obey the authorities over you all the time. Well, what if those authorities are breaking the law themselves? What if those authorities are tyrannical or oppressive? Sorry, Christianity doesn't really have a good answer for that. The fact is our revolutionary forefathers were deists, not Christians. They were, sure, a bunch of Christians participated in the revolution, but, the leadership was definitely not Christian per se. It was, they believed that people had certain inherent rights simply by being human beings, and they revolted against people trying to take away those rights. And that's simply the way it was. So that's kind of where I stand. Along with that revolution, I had some people send me a thing. Well, what about the American Revolution? How's it any different than these riots? Well, there's a hell of a lot of difference. Number one, the Boston Tea Party, for instance, was very carefully, methodically thought out. They planned it out when they went aboard the ship. They removed only the taxed tea and threw it into the water. All the rest of the cargo was spared. I think even, as I recall, they broke a lock on the captain's lockbox in order to get the keys to some of the holds. And they replaced that lock so that the captain wouldn't be charged with it. Maybe other people that know history a little bit more, the Revolutionary War history better than I do, but I also believe that they paid money to people that suffered financial loss from it too, or at least they tried. The whole issue was to directly assault the government's tax, not inflict any damage on any innocent bystanders. And that's exactly why they did what they did the way they did it. You don't see that with the riots in Minneapolis. There's a lot of innocent bystanders, but I'm going to get to that in a moment when I talk about MLK. But yes, I openly condemn what these cops did. I really think part of the problem is how the cops are trained. They are really trained with an us versus them mentality. There is no really understanding of public service forced into police officers. It really is a combative, almost quasi-military style training for most of them. And I think that's part of the problem. I'm not saying that they don't need to know how to shoot and drive, but I think it's more important that they know how to de-escalate a situation and work towards peaceful resolution of situations and violent ones. And I don't think their training does that at all. I think a lot of their training is very much escalation training, and that's wrong to me. I think all cops need to work on their de-escalation techniques. And some police departments recognize what I'm saying, and that's exactly what they do. Do they still focus on gun training and driving? Yes, but they also add in the addition of how do I diffuse a situation before it gets worse instead of coming in and making it worse? It's something to think about. I also think police brutality is a pretty universal issue. Yes, is race involved in this particular circumstance? But I know the statistics too well to know there are Hispanic officers that have been charged with brutality against black people. There have been black officers charged with police brutality against white women, some of them fairly famous. There have been Asian officers that have been charged with police brutality against white people. I mean, there is no combination, I don't think, that hasn't been done with a police brutality charge. I could be wrong about that, but police brutality is actually a fairly common charge. And the real problem is the unions and the law allow cops to be treated as a special class of citizen, and thus they get away with a lot of things. It's not so much a race issue as it is an authority issue. An authority, as I said before, should not just be blindly followed. I think when I look at obedience, when one of the religious aspects to this is that there is a religious aspect, particularly in the Christianity I used to preach, where obedience equals love. So you're supposed to love a person, but you're also supposed to fear them. And that's kind of the relationship that a lot of people look at cops with, or any other governmental authority figure. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you view an individual or a group of people with both fear and love, that is the basis of an abusive relationship. When a person tells you that you need to love them and you need to fear them, that's abusive. You can't color it any way. And the cops have that mentality. You need to love us cops for the work that we do, but you also need to obey our authority. Yeah, that's abuse. That's a classic psychological setup for an abusive relationship. You want my respect as police officers, earn it. I'm not going to just give it to you. You want me to obey, then you better be enforcing an actual legitimate law. And you better tell me, you're supposed to tell me what crime I'm committing and who swore out the complaint. I have the right to know who my accuser is in this country. And, if you don't do that, then you're breaking the law, okay, as a cop. And I'm sorry, I don't think cops should be allowed to break the law. I just don't, okay, and any more than I can. All right, so that'll end my discussion on cops. I want to talk about MLK because I think I've heard a lot of talk about MLK. MLK is a religious figure, so he's fair game for me as an atheist. MLK, however, it's weird because I really don't talk about MLK's theology or his view of the Bible because that's not what he's known for. He's known for, social justice. He's known for civil rights. Now, I've seen both sides of this argument. And I'm going to tell you that there's one argument that's being made, including by a few family members of my own, that, and just to let you know a little background, the Rabyd family has minorities in it, okay? I have two grandchildren, one here and one on the way, that will have some form of minority status in their ethnicity. I'm not ashamed of that. I hope they talk about it openly. I hope in 10, 20 years, race is really not an issue. Personally, I'm going to tell you the problem with these social issues is people are impatient. And I was making the argument, somebody was accusing me, oh, it's the age-old argument, it's better than what it was before. That's a bullshit argument. And I'm going to tell you why it's bullshit, because not everybody who makes that argument is engaged in, well, you have it so much better, isn't. What they're saying is, and in my case, that's what I was saying, you've come a long way, so that should give you basis for hope, not anger. Okay? Yes, there's going to be hiccups in the road where people do shit like this, but you should go forward in hope, not anger. And that is an MLK notion, because MLK definitely preached hope. He didn't preach anger. He didn't preach being an asshole. Okay, he said we've come, he would mark progress and say this gives us basis for hope to look forward to saying we're going to have future good results. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. The other thing that needs to be mentioned about MLK, because I hear this, people trying to justify the riots in Minnesota using the age-old line, the riots are a sign of the unheard. This is something MLK said, but to take that statement out of the context of everything that he stood for and somehow think that that justifies the current situation and the current riots, no. What MLK demonstrates in that statement and the paragraph around it and the things that he said around that is that he understood why people get upset and riot. He was very definitely trying to see the human side of a riot, okay, why people riot, okay? But in the tenor of his entire life, he never condoned riots. He would say those things, the riot is on the internet, and at the same time be condemning the riot. So you need to understand that. So yes, did MLK say stuff about riots and how he understood why people riot? Yes. Did those statements automatically condone riots? No, because he would condemn them with the same breath. All right, you need to understand that MLK was engaged in a strategy that worked. No one, and I repeat, no one has made as much progress in civil rights as Martin Luther King Jr. Period. Okay? And he did it in a very relatively short time. Think about this man's accomplishment for a minute. He pretty much ended segregation. Okay? He led a movement that ended segregation. And don't get me wrong, there's a ton of other people and a ton of other, minority and non-minority leaders in this. I'm not diminishing them in any way, shape, or form. But he did that. He got rid of segregation. He got a law passed through LBJ, one of the most racist presidents we've ever had. I mean, I'm sure there were some in the past that are even more so. But at the time in the 60s, LBJ was a racist Southerner, okay? And yet he signed the civil rights legislation that MLK wanted done. How did he pull that shit off? Nonviolence. You see, because MLK understood the cycle of violence. Okay, I'm going to use Minnesota as an example. So we have a bunch of cops who engage in an action against George Floyd. It's a violent action. It led to his death. Okay, whether or not it was the direct cause of his death, it certainly was an indirect cause of his death. Okay, and I think the manslaughter charge is going to stick, but I think also the guy might get assault. That's a little bit of an aside rabbit trail, but so these people start acting in violence. They throw rocks at police officers. Police officers then act in violence by throwing tear gas, trying to break up the riot. Okay, and then the cycle of violence comes in. Now, in those violent actions of a riot, a lot of innocent people are going to be hurt, just like George Floyd was hurt and killed. The danger of a riot is the riot can kill people. And then who's going to now we got to have justice for them. I've heard all kinds of rulings. A couple things I know for sure. I know that a black business owner who owned a pub had his pub burned to the ground by the rioters, and they came back and tried to steal his safe too. Now we need justice for him. You see where I'm going with this? This is a cycle of violence problem, and it doesn't solve the problem. It just perpetuates the cycle of violence, and it doesn't deal with the issue. See, MLK was brilliant in the fact that nonviolence made all of his opponents look like assholes, and he came out smelling like a rose because his demonstrators would sit there, and the police and the governors of states and white people that were racist in general would scream in his face, do violent action to them, do all kinds of bullshit to them. And you know what? It made it look like them. They were accusing black people of being animals, but who really looked like the animals? The cops. They were the ones engaged in violence. They were the ones doing evil shit to people. And MLK came out of every demonstration with his hands clean. No other justice action was needed for anything that he did. In many riots, women are raped in riots. Who gives justice to them? Now you have to have an act of justice for a woman that was raped. Business owners get their stuff burned out. Now you have to have actions of justice for those that got burned down. Now there's all kinds of unjust actions being taken that have to be rectified because the cycle of violence continues. I'm a libertarian. I try to follow the non-aggression principle as much as possible. I am a big SOB. If I was a violent person, I could really hurt a lot of people and create a lot of injustice in the world. But I'm not. Do I believe that violence has its place? Yes. I believe that you should be allowed to defend your life and the life of another. You should be allowed to defend the rights of another. Now, somebody will say, oh, well, but that's what they're doing with this riot. Are they? How the hell is George Floyd's rights defended by burning another black business owner's business to the ground? How does any of that help? I think the real problem with the riots is, people got pissed off because the officer wasn't immediately arrested. Once again, this is unions. And if that had been a black officer, same thing would have happened. It would have taken 3 days for them to go through the union rigmarole and the review and everything that's required before charges are filed. That's all it is. I'm a political science. I've looked at this. Okay, some of you should read a police union contract sometime and ask yourself a question: who has more rights, the citizen that the police officer is arresting, or the police officer? I'm going to tell you right now, it's the police officer, and it's bullshit. Okay, the government is supposed to protect our rights and uphold them, not violate them. Okay, period. But now, with the riots, you've created all these other injustices. Who's going to give justice for them? See, that's the problem with the riot. It's uncontrolled violence, and it knows it's like a natural disaster because it knows no limit at who the victim is going to be. MLK was brilliant because he didn't fall down that trap. He had no injustices that he committed himself by being nonviolent that had to be rectified. And MLK, as much as he understood rioters, and yes, he said the statement, yeah, riots are the language of the unheard. It's a beautiful, brilliant statement, but in that same speech, he also condemned the riots. He understood the humanity of why people riot. And see, this is the other thing nonviolence allowed Martin Luther King to do. It allowed him to see the humanity of everybody involved, including his opponents. And this is the brilliance of the man. And boy, I think he was taken out of the world way too soon. I think the civil rights movement could have gone a whole hell of a lot further, and we'd be a lot further along if that man hadn't been killed. Now, people ask me, did I used to feel that way? Well, this is where we get back into religion. Religion told me that the human race was divided up into other races. Atheism tells me we're all Homo sapiens, and that the coloring of our skin and our facial features and our build of our bodies, a lot of it is very recent evolutionary, and it's all bullshit. There's no difference between me and any other human being on the planet genetically. I mean, 99% of it is the same. The stuff that makes up the supposed races is so superficial genetically, it's ridiculous. And most of it is simply adaptation to environment. The reason I have white skin is I'm descendant of northerners where the sun don't shine. They don't need darker skin because they don't need to fight off the sun's UV rays. Whereas somebody in Africa where the sun shines all the time, yeah, you're going to get a darker shade. And people with darker shades continue to survive and have less problems. There's benefits all the way around here. My ancestors aren't wasting their genetic energy trying to give me darker skin when I don't need it. Okay. So that's all it is. We're all still human beings, regardless of our wrapper. And I don't have this notion as an atheist that there's this dividing line, that there's, sons of Ham, Shem, and Japheth. That's bullshit. Okay. My issue with all of this is that I am this is my opinion. I do not think these riots solved a single problem. I think they just created more. And any sympathy that that George Floyd generated with what happened to him gets dissipated, and his memory gets besmirched by riots. You actually are pushing justice backwards when you create acts of injustice that hurt other innocent people. Nobody's going to take you seriously after that. If Martin Luther King Jr. was alive, he would have gone out there and he would have told you all to stay calm and not do a single violent action. And then he would have engaged a speech about George Floyd and what a valuable human being he was. And this is why we still need change. And because he engaged in nonviolence, he had the political gravity to make those speeches, and everybody listened, including racist white fucks. This is a little bit longer video than usual, and I think that's pretty much all I'm going to have to say about this. But I'm a great admirer of MLK, always have been, because I think his tactic in getting social change is superior to those that advocate violence. You want to get social change, make the other people look like jerks, animals, and assholes. Don't look like one yourself. Well, I want to thank you once again for stopping by the channel, and welcome. Comments have a way of influencing the content of Friday's videos, normally, not today. I just felt there was issues that had to be addressed. And I will respond to any comment when I can. You're also free to ask direct questions. For those of you that have commented this week, I'll address some of those comments. We'll do a double on week 20. On the week 20 Friday video, so I'll do that then in a week. Thank you for your comments, other than, some of the ones that have just been straight up weird. Thankfully, most of them are in my spam folder. If you're looking to understand something better, you can ask me a question. Maybe I'll address it in a video. You're also free to suggest what you'd like to see me do. I do want to make an announcement at this point. I'm probably going to go back to 3 videos a week here shortly. So I don't know. I know that videos will still be uploaded Friday, but the other 2 days are kind of up in the air yet. I'm trying to figure that out. One thing I don't tolerate is name calling in the comments. I don't think it produces anything, and it doesn't really generate any results. Be sure to like and subscribe and get your notification bell. And hopefully I can someday convince you to be a rabid atheist like myself. In the meantime, this is Rabyd, the Rabid Atheist, signing off and wishing you a good day. And may peace come soon.